Hey there, and welcome. So, have you ever really thought about what a software developer does all day? I mean, it's so easy to just picture someone hunched over a keyboard just typing, right? But the reality? It's way, way more than that. So, let's pull back the curtain and see what their job is really all about in today's tech world.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What does a developer actually do during, a typical work cycle, what we call a sprint? Now, if your first thought is, they write code, well, you're not wrong, but you're definitely not right either. It goes so much deeper than just the keyboard.
All right, here's the best way I found to think about this, and it's a game changer. Picture a developer not as a coder, but as a skilled builder on a really high stakes construction project. Seriously, if you can hold on to that one idea, it's going to unlock everything else we're about to talk about, from the planning all the way to fixing problems on the fly. So, if they're builders, what's the first thing any good construction project needs? A blueprint, right? And we're not talking about some vague sketch on a napkin. For a developer, this is a formal, rock-solid blueprint for quality that the entire team has to stick to. And that blueprint? It has a name. It's called the definition of done. And listen, this thing is not just a friendly suggestion. It is the team's shared, non-negotiable contract for what done actually means. It's the gold standard for quality, and every single piece of work, no matter how small, has to meet it. No ifs, ands, or buts. So what's actually in this blueprint? Well, think of it like a super strict checklist. A task isn't done until it actually does what the user needs it to do. That's the user story. It has to pass all the specific requirements. We call those acceptance criteria. All the documentation has to be updated. It has to pass all the automated tests. And here's a big one. Another developer has to look at the code and give it a thumbs up. Only when every single one of those boxes is checked can you say the work is truly finished. And this really hammers home a super important point, right? Builders can't work in silos. Imagine the plumber and the electrician working off different blueprints. It would be a disaster. It's the same here. To make sure they're all building to that same quality standard, developers have to be constantly collaborating. They're talking, they're reviewing each other's work, they're helping each other out to make sure the whole thing stands up strong. Okay, so we've got the blueprint. Now, what does the actual day-to-day construction look like? What are the core things these builders, our developers, are doing all sprint long? Well, it's this constant cycle, really. First, they're always looking ahead, refining the work that's coming up next. Then they're designing the architecture, the deep down structure of the thing. They're also estimating how long different jobs are going to take. And maybe most importantly, they are always working to maintain the overall health and stability of the project. And all of that work, that whole cycle, it all serves one critical central goal: to keep the product in a potentially shippable state at all times. Just let that sink in for a second. That means at any point on any day, the product has to be stable enough that you could, in theory, release it to the world. There's no such thing as, oh, it's broken right now, but we'll fix it by Friday. Nope, it has to be ready to go always. But, just like any real-world construction site, stuff happens. Problems pop up out of nowhere that can bring everything to a grinding halt. So, what does our skilled builder do when they run into these on-site emergencies? And this is where a really important distinction comes in. On one side, you've got the developer's actual job: writing code, fixing bugs, designing new features. That's their work. But on the other side, you've got what we call impediments. These are the external things that block them, things they can't control. Like a critical server goes down, or they're stuck waiting for another department to make a decision. The key thing here is knowing what's your job versus what's just in your way. So what's the right move when you hit one of those external blockers? Do you spend hours trying to fix it yourself? Absolutely not. A smart builder doesn't try to solve the supply chain issue. They immediately tell the foreman, and in the software world, that's the Scrum Master. It's the foreman's job to clear that roadblock so the builders can get back to building. All right, now for one of my favorite parts of this whole thing: choosing your own tools. I mean, think about it. Any master craftsperson, like a master carpenter, gets to choose their own tools, right? They know what works best. Well, developers are exactly the same. They get a huge say in how they actually do the work. And they're not just picking their favorite text editor. The team gets to self-organize around some really important stuff. They decide together on their approach to testing. They figure out the best way to automate the build process. They even agree on their own coding guidelines and decide which special techniques they're going to use to ensure quality. And that sense of ownership, that's everything when it comes to building something great. And man, they have a pretty awesome toolkit to pick from. You've got things like test-driven development, which totally flips the script on how you write code. There's pair programming, where two devs team up on one computer to get a better result. And then there's refactoring, which is basically the art of tidying up existing code without changing what it does. These are all pro-level tools they can pull out to do the job right.
Okay, let's just zoom in on one of those for a second to make a final, really important point. Let's talk about test-driven development, or TDD. Now, this concept is kind of wild. You actually write a test that you know is going to fail before you write any of the actual code. Then, you write the absolute minimum amount of code needed to make that test pass. I know, it sounds completely backward, but trust me, it can be unbelievably effective.
But, and this is the big but, here's the most important thing to understand. A tool is not a magic wand. If you have a skilled developer who knows how to use TDD properly, you get beautiful, clean, stable code. But if it's applied by someone who doesn't really get it, the result is a total crapshoot. It just proves the old saying, a tool is only as good as the person using it. Which brings us to this final thought. If we accept that developers are skilled builders, that they're responsible for the blueprint, the daily build, and choosing their own tools, then what's the biggest risk to a project? Is it the process they follow? Or is it their actual level of skill, their mastery of the craft? It's something to really think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this one.